Hey everyone, this is a brief lecture review to finish up chapters 9 and 10. So in class we already got to cover intelligence and talk a little bit about Piaget as well as some sociometric ratings that children will experience in middle childhood, but we didn't get to finish some of the other topics. So I know that everyone is capable of reading this material, but I also just wanted to clarify certain aspects of the material as well. So the chapters that this covers are 9 and 10. So for 9, we have a little bit of physical changes and then a few more cognitive changes to discuss. And then for 10, we really just have some of the developmental changes that occur with children in their socio-emotional development. So with physical development, we know the body has stopped that really rapid growth that we saw in infancy. Now we're just seeing more slow, consistent growth. So every year they're getting a little bigger, a little heavier, their brain volume is stabilizing, and really we're getting some continued growth and change in the brain, especially in that prefrontal cortex, that will develop up through early adulthood. So in average though, in middle childhood and late childhood, we're just getting a little bit better, faster and stronger, a little bit heavier, but not that rapid kind of really, really quick change that we saw in infancy. And our motor skills are getting better coordinated. So we're able to control our body more. We see children starting to really excel in different sports, gymnastics, ballet, karate. We're getting more coordinated, and girls are often even more so than boys in those fine motor skills. So things like making those beautiful little bead trinkets that we see on the slide there. Those require those fine motor skills, carefully placing beads and making sure not to mess any of them up. And girls are often just a little bit better. And boys sometimes excel more in those gross motor skills, big body movements like running and jumping. For health and exercise, we've talked about this a little bit before. That second point there really is that most of us aren't getting enough exercise, and there are a lot of overweight individuals. So this is true of children, especially as we get into this middle and late childhood aspects, but really most kids are in good health. If children do pass away, most of the time it's due to injury or cancer, unfortunately. So we're not seeing children on average kind of being sickly or anything like that. As we move across the lifespan, those common causes of death and injury or of death will change. So we'll get more chronic conditions. But right now with little kids, generally they might be overweight, not getting enough exercise, but our bodies are still relatively healthy. So we had some cognition that we need to talk about. We had a chance to talk about intelligence, but we really didn't get to talk about some of our exceptionalities with that. And so one exceptionality is intellectual disability. So individuals with intellectual disability have to meet two criteria, and they have to meet both of them. So their IQ score has to be lower than what we would expect, lower than average, so about 70 or below. And they also need to have really some problems adapting to their environment. So we don't put the intellectually disabled label on individuals unless they're not doing well with meeting the demands that their environment places upon them. So if we have both of those criteria, we would call someone intellectually disabled. This used to be termed as mental retardation. That's not a term that psychologists use anymore. So ID is the preferred term. Another form of disability someone can have is learning disability. This is not the same thing as an intellectual disability. People with learning disabilities can have any range of IQ, can have a very high IQ, moderate, low. But the biggest thing is they have difficulty in one specific topic. So it might be with reading, might have something in math, like a dyscalculia, and so they're just having issues with processing one academic topic. You can have more than one learning disability and have issues processing multiple topics, but on average, though, it's really just difficulty with an academic topic. There's a link here that goes through different types of learning disabilities. Another thing we start seeing in children during this school age time is ADHD, so attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We've got some core symptoms there. Kids have difficulty paying attention, can be impulsive, and can be hyperactive. It's really important to get the right diagnosis for these kids, and generally it's going to work best if we can give medication as well as psychosocial treatment. And then autism spectrum disorders are another thing we'll start to see as kids enter the school age. Generally, though, this onset is in the first few years of life, so many parents do notice it quite early. And it's a real spectrum, though. So those cases that are not as extreme might not be identified until the child is school age. And what we see is, there's a phrase, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, pretty much saying that we're not the same. The individuals with autism are extremely different from one another. They are, it's not something where everyone presents the exact same symptoms, but really we do see some deficits with social interaction, some stereotype behaviors. And there's some information there as well if you want to follow up. So what we do for educational issues then is provide an individualized education plan. So it should be specific to the student and should help them in the least restrictive environment. So we want them to be included as much as possible and to have the fewest amount of restrictions put on them as we can handle, or as the child can handle. So some other ways that we're developing in our cognition in this period, we're having real improvements in attention, memory, thinking. So all of these kind of ways of processing, executive functioning, these are all getting better. We're getting better at being creative and flexible thinkers. We're also better at our memory. So our young kids will rely on things like rehearsal to remember something. So if we say, remember to tell your mom you need to bring in lunch tomorrow, then they'll say, tell mom about lunch, tell mom about lunch, tell mom about lunch. They're just rehearsing it in their brain. Older kids will use a bigger process, elaboration. So they'll be able to say, what does I need to tell mom? I need to tell her about lunch. Okay, and then they'll try and relate that back to other things in their mind, relate that back to environmental cues, maybe write it down. They just have a much better understanding of how memory works than our little kids. So they're really getting this understanding of meta memory. It's an informal understanding, but they're understanding my memory works in this way. So if I want to remember something, I have to use these strategies. And this is a part of metacognition, which these kids are getting better at. So we know cognition is thinking, so metacognition is thinking about thinking. So if I want to pass a test, what strategies do I need to use? How do I use them? What is my best way? And so they'll use that process to understand how to better learn things. And then our gifted kids. So this is another one of our exceptionalities. We used to just say anything above a 130 on the IQ scale was gifted. But now we look for also superior talent. And so you can have someone maybe whose IQ doesn't hit that benchmark, but they're extremely talented in music or writing or dance or art, just really good at problem solving. And really we think this is not something you can just teach. The kid has to already have that desire. And generally, though, they flourish with early instruction. So you could have a kid that's amazing at music, but they've never taken a music lesson, never had any experience. It's going to be hard for them to fully develop that talent. And the parents then also need to really commit to helping that child there. So that'll get us through the first chapter, chapter 9, which was on cognition and physical development, so physical and cognitive development. Where we're at now is the start of chapter 10, which is on some of the social aspects of development. So I'm going to stop this short video just for ease, and then I'll make another short video kind of covering this socio-emotional chapter. That way you can kind of review as you need without having the long, lengthy video. All right, I'll be back for chapter 10.